Hi guys, so do you remember in the first episode when I mentioned there were 5 vocal registers, or 5 main vocal registers? So I've had the 3 core ones out of the way, the ones you absolutely need for singing, but we have left 2, the extension registers as I call them. And let's start with the first one, vocal fry. Now, what exactly is vocal fry? Well, it's this noise. It's a low frequency, crackling, weakish kind of sound that sits below your chest voice and actually is responsible for a lot of your lowest notes. Remember in episode 1 in chest voice when I said that your chest voice is responsible for your lowest notes but not your absolute lowest notes? Now this is what vocal fry is for. It's more widely used than you think, and it doesn't really sound like much now, but when I explain what you can do with it and how many things you can do with it, it'll be much more frequent and much more clear. But yeah, so that's the vocal fry. Just a little precursor, if you can't find how to use this, or you can't work it out, or you don't have any sort of affinity in the area, don't worry about it. For the vast majority of people, it will not affect your melodic singing voice, outside of maybe some bass singers, as a lot of bass singers use this frequency and this vocal register all the time, and can really use it to sing pretty good strong bass lines. But for the rest of us who aren't bass singers, it's a nice little trick you can have and a good extension to the lower end of your range. If you can't find it, it's not a big problem, so don't worry about it. Focus on the first 2 we looked at, but this one can be fun, so give it a go. Okay, so how do you find it? Well, all you really need to do is relax your chords, don't try and do too much with them, and just allow less air to pass through. So just go, you're using exclusively muscle, there's very little airflow at all, but you're not really trying to do anything, you're not really doing a lot with it, it's just allowing your voice to naturally just kind of do that motion without allowing too much air to go through. That's why it's so crackly and low. But if you can't find it, just try to jump straight into it. You can kind of go to a lower chest voice, so like da 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 da. Eventually, if you're not trying to beef things up or trying to do things too hard, your chest voice will eventually stop being able to phone it that low, and your vocal fry will naturally come into its place. As I say, it's not something you can just automatically find, and not everyone can do it. But if you try and go really low in your chest voice, you can't go any lower, a vocal fry will generally take over at that point. But there are other things you can do with it. Like what? As I say, a vocal fry is the absolute bottom of your range, it's the absolute basement of your voice. It's a couple of notes under your chest voice for most people, and that's kind of where it's used. For some people, it is just a couple of notes that you barely touch and barely even have any chance to do anything with. For others, it can add almost another octave of bass-like low notes. Not for everybody, but that can happen. So if we look at our average singer, Mr. G2 to G5, with their kind of modal voice for the first 3 choruses we looked at, you're now looking kind of between the F2 and the C2. That's kind of where the vocal fry will sit for most people. And again, you barely touch it, you scoop down to it now and again, you kind of go like, duh, and you kind of go up and down with it and see what you can do with it. Other people, it's kind of their gateway into the first octave. So for me, I'm a baritone whose natural chest range probably stops at around an F2 or an E2 on a good day. I can kind of go down into like the B1, A1 sort of range with this sometimes. I'm like, no. Like I can go low with it, it's kind of my avenue into the first octave. I wouldn't really do a great deal with it, it's not something I'd use a lot in my singing voice, but it's a nice little trick I have got up my sleeve should I ever want to use it, and I do have that access of my voice accessible due to the vocal fry register. Now other people can scoop so much lower with this, so a lot of basses use this for their bass lines, and kind of in the first octave is where this really shines. They can beef it up a little bit more, they've got more natural power and more kind of practice with it. But there's a bass singer called Tim Faust. He's with an a cappella group called Home Free. He can do a lot of his bass lines kind of like in a constant strong vocal fry, and that's kind of around, I don't know, the A1, G1 sort of area. But he has also been known to scoop down to, I believe it was an A0, which is on the bottom end of the piano, if not past the piano. I can't remember right off the top of my head at the moment. But some people, as I say, have this extension that goes so far down with the vocal fry, just because of how crackly it is, just what your chords can do at a fundamental level. Some people can genuinely go ultra mega low with it. But yeah, as I say, some people you'll barely touch it, some people it'll add like a nice little octave and a nice little low extension that you can do a lot with, and for some people it will add an absolute mountain of low notes that you can play around with and see what you can do with them. So just explore that and see what your voice can do. Alright, so that's kind of the crackly bass vocal fry that is kind of what it is fundamentally, but did you know there are actually 2 ways to beef this register up a little bit? The first one is the vocal growl, or the fire breathing technique, which sounds like this. Warning, this is going to sound a bit strange. Right? A lot of bass singers like Avi Kaplan use this technique to hit really strong G1s and A1s and F1s sometimes. My voice doesn't quite go that low, but I go like, and it's kind of pretty low, it's got like more of a forward sound to it. This technique, as I say, is used to hit stronger vocal fry notes. It's a bit breathier, but it's also allowing way more connection, way more power to go down. So how do you do it? So the best way I learned to do it is try and cough like and just hold on to that feeling. So kind of go and then just try to play around with that feeling until it doesn't tickle your throat and doesn't hurt, and see how low or how high it can get for your particular voice. Warning, don't practice it too much, it is pretty fatiguing. Just on that first example I did there, my throat tickled a little bit because it's not fully warmed up today, that's all. But it's not a technique you should practice much. Now and again, once or twice a day maybe, but don't overuse it because it is quite fatiguing. But it's a nice little thing to have, because if you have a microphone and you go boom, it'll make the whole place shake and vibrate. So it is a really fun technique to use, but warning, don't use it too much. Okay, so the other way to beef up is a little bit harder to find, a little bit more complicated. It's essentially trying to mix your upper vocal fry with your lower chest voice. So kind of like, yeah. Do you see how that's got more power than and it's got a bit more to it? So on the lower end, this can be called subharmonics. I can't really do subharmonics because that gets to like the F1, G1 sort of land. Look at David Lee Larson or David Kahn. They're two really good examples of people on YouTube that explain subharmonics really well. What I was doing was more of just a low chest voice with a bit of a fry mix to it to add a bit more power. It is quite hard to find, but do you see how a da is different to a or a ah? You kind of see how those sounds are different. For me personally, this adds like another lower extension to my voice. It's not really easy to maintain for very long because it's using I throat level, which isn't somewhere you want to be singing from too often. But it does add kind of this beefier lower chest voice. I want to imitate some bass in it, I can go like, I can sing really low. Like there's a part in a Stray Kids song called Third Eye, where the guy called Felix, who has a really low voice, just goes, and I couldn't get close to that in my actual regular chest voice because I don't have that lower voice really, whereas if I mix a little bit of fry in there, I can get down to it. But how do you find that? Well, kind of take a fundamental vocal fry, like and just try and add a little, and just try and put it up and add a bit more chest into it, instead of like fully utilising the chest muscles. I kind of go and then just try and mix everything together. It'll take a while to get used to, and that was a little bit primitive. It won't fully get it embedded that well, but that's kind of how you find it. You just try to mix those two registers together and see what results you get, because it does add that between like a B1 sometimes and like the F2. You can really beef up your low notes with it if you try and like add more chest and connection and vocal fry rather than going down the breathier route. Alright, so the last main use of singing a vocal fry in contemporary music is as an onset. So an onset is essentially when you first start a note or start a passage, and it's kind of the noise you create to do that. So there's three main ones. There's one called an aspirate, which is an air-based one, so it's ha. Or there's a glottal onset, like a muscle based, which is like a ah, and it's just straight in with that ah. Whereas a vocal fry onset is a ah. It's a good way to start trying to go into a lower chest coordination. Dimash does this quite a lot. He goes yasa da do do ba do or whatever. I don't speak Kazakh Russian, but he starts everything with like a da da da, and it's a good way to burst into a low chest voice by starting with a vocal fry onset. In metal music, you can also have a vocal fry based screaming technique. I'm not an expert on screaming. I don't fully understand it. I know to do logical like it's like shaping the vocal fry growl almost, but highs I have no idea how to produce that. That'll take a while to learn. But essentially they're pushing a vocal fry like coordination up higher to get that rasp and that natural distortion. So there's a lot of things you can do with the vocal fry, but just play around with it and see what yours can do. So thank you for watching that. As I say, this is an extension register. If you can't do it, it's fine. It won't add too much to your melodic singing voice. It's just a nice little party trick to have here and there. But next time we'll be looking at the second one, flipping everything on its head, going really high into the whistle tone. That one's going to be interesting. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.